Hi, I'm Celia Schilling from Yacht Club Games.
Hey, this is James from Megacat Studios.
Hey, this is Matt, aka Stormageddon from Reignite, Screen Snark, and the Fun and Games podcast.
This is Stephanie from the Boss Rush podcast and the Boss Rush Network.
Hey, this is Mark and Keon from Bonte Avond.
Hey, this is Sebastian with the ProNerdReport.com and the Single Player Experience podcast.
Hey, this is Todd Mitchell from Code Right Play.
Salutations, this is Mike Carroll from Stroll Art.
Hey, this is Patrick from the Backlog Odyssey.
Hey, this is Rune from Runic Codes.
Hi, this is Andrew from Spalato Bros.
Hi everyone, Jill Grote here from the Indie Informer.
Hey, this is Brimstone, and you're listening to Roger Reichart on the Gamerheads Podcast.
And welcome to another episode of the Gamerheads Podcast. My name is Roger. With me this week, I have a very special guest. I have James Deighan from Megacat Studios, the creators behind the game WrestleQuest, and I'm super excited to talk about that game because I got to play some of it at PAX. I didn't get to play as much as I wanted to. I probably could have spent the whole day at PAX East playing this game. But I'm really happy to have James on the show with us. And James, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having us. It was hard for me to keep my shirt on knowing we were talking about wrestling again.
You could pull Hulk Hogan there and rip it off for
Sometimes you get so excited and so sweaty with sharing WrestleQuest facts, Since I'm at home, there's no HR issues. It's like, how do I say no,
Oh, that's awesome. Well, welcome to the show. I'm so glad that we were able to connect. Before we get into the game WrestleQuest, I want to ask you a couple questions about yourself. First of all, tell us about yourself. And how did you get into gaming, and how did you get into the whole creating games?
It's a good question. So I wish I had a more romantic version of the story, but we started making games for fun with a group of us because we had just a shared passion for retro gaming as collectors. And we made a couple very bad games, and then we made a couple games that were also bad but good enough for other indies to support it. And we were like, man, this was so much fun. I wonder if we could do that on a commercial level. And then fast forward 8 years later, took a while. and we just continued to persevere, I guess, and just kind of build a path. We're located here in Pittsburgh. We're one of only two gaming companies in the area. Like most gaming companies are on the West Coast, so it's not exactly easy or natural to walk into a a networking event or a career place and just find all sorts of folks who work in gaming. And then, because we live in the internet world, we can kind of message anybody. So I started eventually, just kind of rubbing all sorts of folks who are participating in game jams and making games for fun, and which is also very different than commercial. And just slowly but surely we chipped away at all the things we needed to do to kind of budget and prepare for WrestleQuest, which WrestleQuest was actually one of the first games we ever wanted to make as Megacat. We just have such a reverence for RPGs and what goes into the design and the progression and the level of detail and the hours and months and years that go into it. We're like, man, it's going to cost a lot of money to do this. So we just kept chipping away at it. But we got pretty lucky that we found a publisher around halfway through that was willing to share the vision. And we met all sorts of wrestlers along the way that were willing to jump in and participate. So it's definitely been a journey. I'm excited that we're near launch now. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah. I loved one of your promo videos. I think was Jeff Jarrett. And you had a guitar sound, and you said, Jeff, is this the sound of guitar hitting over somebody's head? And he takes the guitar and hits it over somebody's head. So that's the sound we're looking for, right? And
it's really, that was one of my favorite skits too. Yeah, it's funny. We have both that broken guitar hanging in the person that was hit with its office, and then we have a to be broken second guitar that we're just waiting for the right moment, kind of like a pop the champagne, I can't wait.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So yeah, tell us more about WrestleQuest. I mean, from what I know, I mean the bit that I played, I know it's a JRPG mixed with wrestling. So can you tell a little bit about the story behind it and what's it about?
Yeah, so WrestleQuest is the world's first pro wrestling JRPG, turn-based combat, and all the trimmings and game sensibilities you'd want to see in a JRPG. One of the goals we had at the onset of creating WrestleQuest, we said a lot of goals, but I'd say like the three pillars are: number one, whether you're a wrestling fan or a JRPG fan, we wanted you to feel satisfied playing the game. We didn't want it to feel like a JRPG with wrestlers snapped in, or a wrestling game that doesn't satisfy like a JRPG player. So we've put a massive amount of time. We've actually been giving panels now the last year and a half on the wrestlification of the JRPG and how we've tuned these systems to make it very authentically wrestling and authentically JRPG. So that was the number one challenge and goal. Second one was we wanted to establish a visual identity for the game that was still retro and nostalgic and pixel art, but paid into the homage and level of detail of these legendary wrestlers and likenesses, and also didn't look like the 40th Fire Pro Wrestling game, right? so we like stumbled into this after a lot of kind of discussions with friends and fans. Is that for a lot of us, our first memories of wrestling were actually the toys and action figures. So we realized that we could also solve that visual identity problem and create really fun like design affordance space if everyone had articulated joints and moved like an action figure. And it solves a lot of things, like I could snap your arm off and no blood comes out, and that's cool. We can kind of dance around things like performance enhancing drugs, like an action figure can have super glue as his analog and that right back on, and it's keeps him in the run. So that was like a key breakthrough for us too. And then the last one was we set out specifically to work with I'd say there's like 5 wrestler licenses and estates we just really always wanted to work with. Macho Man was number 1 for us. Road Warriors, Andre the Giant, Jake the Snake, and then Jeff Jarrett, which are some people laugh at, but when people ask me who my favorite wrestler is, my top 3, I say it's Jeff Jarrett 3 times.
Wow.
It's like
wow.
I'm just like a huge fan of, and arguably Jeff has done more for wrestling than any other single wrestler at this point. You think about not just the like TNA and things like this. What I've found in this kind of brothers in arms world of wrestling and locker rooms is that Jeff is highly respected and beloved by the actual wrestlers themselves. Would you just don't realize or appreciate when you're a fan just watching the show? But it's like everyone that I've ever met has been well over 100 wrestlers at this point. They have like a true like love for Jeff. And Jeff, he does good by them, like he's definitely an exception in a world full of like chaos and carnies and personalities, so but we were able to accomplish all of those things, and through hell and high water and sweat, baby oil, perseverance, all those things makes it cool,
Yeah, and we'll get into that a little bit later about the fact that you did have a wrestling ring set up at PAX, which was pretty awesome. And I did get to see your panel too on the.
Did you?
Yeah, I loved it. It was so good. And it was, and I will say, I mean, this is not just to float your own boat, but I actually thought that was one of the better presentations, because like you had a definite, here's the agenda, here's like the things that you went through. Like it was just well done. So nice job. So yeah,
I wanted to know, by the way, Roger, we've been in a lot of panels now for a few years, and I would say that the wrestling fan is uniquely engaged and like excited. It's like we did pack that room the last 2 times we gave it, but like I've never had panels where we've had people follow up with questions and responses and the thank you notes. It's been awesome. I want to say it's just wrestling fans, but it's like it's it's definitely a better reception than we ever could have dreamed of, and I just love it. And it's like I feel like my people are all coming to see it.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because like I've mentioned this before, there is a fun like mix between video game enthusiast and wrestling enthusiast, right? Like there's like that crossover between both of them, and you can see it in the games, right? Not like look at all the wrestling games that have been made since we were kids. Like I remember playing tag team wrestling like on the NES, right? Which wasn't that great, but it was okay, right? And growing up with like muscle wrestling, Muscle Men, and the wrestling game, not great either.
Warzone on the Game Boy is one of the worst games I've ever played. I played a ton of it.
And that's the thing, right? Like we grew up playing these bad wrestling games, and we came up with our own stories behind it and everything. There's a lot of these characters because like you had to. But one of the things that I really love about this is the fact that this is, like you said, the first JRPG game that's like mixes both JRPG and wrestling together. So what inspired that? Like how did you come to that realization of like, hey, this is something we want to do?
We have always wanted to make a wrestling game, and we always wanted to make an RPG, and we were mapping out kind of the pillars of each. So, something that I've loved about the experience is that one of my best friends and one of the partners of Mega Cat, Zach, did not follow wrestling growing up. And we were kind of sitting there at the office trying to figure out a way to make the wrestling game come to life. And I remember listing out all the pillars of what we loved about wrestling. And one of the ways we were able to persuade him into considering it was like, well, Zach, it's really all about these spectacle, over-the-top character personalities. Like, it's really like the stories they could tell and the classes that they are. Like, I think there's enough here for analogs that you should at least consider like wrestlers as character classes, and watch some promos. Don't worry about the matches. Don't worry about the rest. So watch some like late 80s, early 90s promos and just tell me you don't feel your adrenaline pumping or you don't want to put some tassels on, dude. And I remember he came back out of his like office maybe like, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours later, and he was just like, this is crazy. He's like, how does anyone get into this? And then like fast forward like a week later, and he was like, we have to make this game. Like, we have to do this. He's like, I've been watching promos from Macho Man for the last 3 hours. He's like, I don't understand why no one's made like a story-driven game about this game. Like, like I know, dude. I knew you'd come around. But we wanted to make them both separately, and then we just realized that RPGs are great whenever they have excellent stories and progression and classes and as we laid out all the things that we loved about RPGs, we looked at how we could solve that with wrestling. And if we're forcing the issue or if it felt like it could be made natural, then we just realized there's just so many analogs. Like why would we miss out on the opportunity to bring two of our dreams to life in one big thing? So that was the beginning of the challenge, but it was definitely really exciting for the team to jump in the deep end. And you mentioned that there's so much crossover, and what's funny about that is we brought this game to maybe a dozen publishers, and it was like publisher after publisher could not say no quickly enough. It was always just like oh well, we think wrestling fans like they're blue collar, they don't really want to think, they don't really want to play a strategy game, or we think these licenses are too old, like most people don't even know who like Macho Man or Andre the Giant are anymore. Like those guys.
Oh my gosh.
They're in the late 30s, early 40s, 50s. Like they're not really playing games, and it was like over and over, just like everyone had a different opinion of what was wrong about it, but everyone was in agreement that wrestling and JRPGs like cannot live together. And we never lost hope, but there's a few times that we were thinking about cutting scope, and we're like, maybe this becomes like our favorite experiment that we just finish and we just pray. And we cut the scope, we cut the content, we cut the areas, and then we use this as like the episode 1 or something, and then we brought it to Skybound, and we got lucky because one of the team members at that time, who's no longer at that company, which is a massive wrestling fan, and when we saw that we had like the this kind of coming of age story with our core protagonist, Muchacho Man. And we actually had this kind of serious undertone mixed with a lot of this really silly, Mega Cat writing mixed with wrestling spectacle. He kind of jumped in the deep end with us and was like, all right, we're just going to find a way to get this done. And it definitely took a lot longer than everyone expected for many reasons. But I would say that when you're making a game as a fan and you're scoping it as a fan, it's so hard to maintain like a disciplined anything. Like, at one point we literally had to be cut off because we were, writing and putting in more characters and licenses and locations because there's just like there's an infinite well of stuff here because we've lived this for our whole lives, right? It's like it's like our favorite genre and our favorite, sports entertainment vehicle. And it's like, we had so many things in the cutting room floor that I still wish we could fit in. Like we wanted to have an area that was like it's kind of the, it's going to sound silly, but like as an example, we wanted to have an area that was dedicated to exploring the rich history of avian culture and wrestling. You'd have like Hawk and Raven and Coco Beware. We'd have all these like all these wrestlers there. They'd just be like, "Can you believe it? This whole time it's birds," and it's just like we had a lot of stuff like that we just we cut pretty early because we wanted to maintain like the seriousness and undertone that pays into the autobiographical stories of these characters, and then also captures for someone who doesn't know anything about wrestling, what a territory is and how that works, and kind of like what these wrestlers and characters go through to dedicate themselves to the sport, because there's not just silliness in the game. There's there's storylines where like the luchador is letting his family down because he's on the road every day and he's missing his children growing up, and he's having to choose between being this local hero and letting his family down. And there's another wrestler that we learn when we kind of work through that becomes in your party, and he's a local star that's kind of outgrown that local scene. But he doesn't want to give up in his community to help kind of bring him up to where he is, but he knows that he's kind of hit the ceiling there. So it's, there's a lot of that in the game that I think just becomes really interesting for someone who's whether or not you're from like a wrestling fandom background. And then and it's probably something you can relate to from your experience doing different types of fan geek media. But there's a lot of lapsed fans out there that are like casually into it, but they really haven't followed wrestling in 20 years. Like the last time they maybe watched it closely was high school. And we've met a lot of those fans because they kind of pop out first. They're like, I think this game is made for me. Like, I'm into this, and maybe they don't want to play finger karate with their gamepad. They don't want to jump into like a super deep customization. They want to be able to pick up and play. And I think RPGs provide enough of that too.
I love that. I know in your talk, you talked about how difficult it was to find a publisher, right? Because of the fact that like they didn't see that connection there, which is funny and fascinating to me. But the other thing that I loved too is, the fact that you did highlight that you worked with wrestlers and you dug into their stories and brought a lot of that aspect to the game. Were there any moments where you had feedback from a wrestler and you're like, I have no idea how we're going to incorporate that into the game?
I would say that, I do. So without naming the wrestler, one of my favorite experiences about WrestleQuest has been getting input from these wrestlers that do not and have not played games, right? So like very commonly you talk to them and they would talk about like, Pac-Man and, they talk about how their kids play Roblox and they're like, my kids play Roblox. Like, that's cool. It's just like that, but I would say that most of the feedback we would get would be so 10,000 foot that we could find a way to apply it. And they were trusting us as like the games fans and the games experts. But we had one wrestler specifically who was, sitting down with us at dinner. He actually flew into the office and spent like 2 days in Pittsburgh. I think he was going to be at some other fan event. It was about an hour or two away from us. And thought he would just come in early and, sit down, see the project, talk to the team and see what else he could do. And think he had some other bigger vision for other project on the horizon, and he wanted to find a way to help lift this up, and then maybe build another way to extend his current kind of enterprising, world. But anyway, we're way into this conversation. He's just throwing out brainstorm after brainstorm item and trying to persuade us to license the Holiday Inn logo, because there's a few specific Holiday Inns that he thought we should include in each region. And I'm like, I understand that hotels are a major piece of living on the road, but like, I just don't think it's going to translate to fans. And he's like, no, man, the hotels are key. He's like, the hotel parties. He's like this one specific Holiday Inn in Philly. He's like, it's so crazy. Like, everyone knows about it. We're like 10 minutes into this thread, and I'm like, I'm sorry, man. Like, we have to put that to bed. Like, we're not licensing the Holiday Inn, and if we were, like, it wouldn't even play, because it's an E10 plus game. There's no alcohol. And there's no drugs, so we can't do this, And maybe just sitting there shaking his head, like you just don't. He's like calling all the wrestlers on speakerphone. He's like, "Tell James what it was like at the Holiday Inn in Philly," And it was like the guy on the line to be like, "It was crazy, bro," So that's probably my favorite example of just complete nonsense that he couldn't fit in, but.
Oh, that is hilarious. When I met with you after towards the end of the event, I should say, and one of the things I mentioned to you all was the fact that, to me, I felt like this was like the version of Madden where you guys were incorporating wrestlers into getting the feedback around the gameplay, and just how like was this legit? Was this how this feel like when you're on the road, and what some of your worries were, right? Like, same thing with Madden, when they brought in Madden, and Madden's like, this is not football. What is this? And they had to like basically put 12 people on the field, like, or 11 people on the field, like he said. Like, you have to have the number of people on the field. So I really appreciate the fact that you incorporated all these wrestlers into building this game, because I think that's just so amazing.
Yeah, it's like initially we had a wish list. That wish list was dashed because of how licensing works and is limited through the WWE. And then eventually a lot of our things that were dashed became undashed, because we would kind of find an education on how to make it work, and where and who the right stakeholders were. And one of the reasons that WrestleQuest is as big as it is because we were just finding over and over and over new talent that had a great story to tell, that fit what we were looking for, that were available, and they all came in these little batches. And because it took so long to go through clearance on each, which is a whole nother story for my autobiography someday, which I'll sell 11 copies of, but it's like, man, it's just it's been an experience. But what do you do once you realize that you could add in Junkyard Dog, and like, what a killer like talent. And I just loved him growing up, and his gimmick is so great, and like, it's dogs and chains and like a junkyard atmosphere, and it fits an era we already had, and we're like, guess we're adding him in, and then over and over and over. And one of my favorite areas in the game is built for the Road Warriors, because they had this Mad Max vibe, right? And, and it's like, we created this this area that's all dedicated to this tribe that worships the Road Warriors, and they steal war paint from all the other communities to sacrifice the war paint for the Road Warriors. And they're this like called Wrestle Raiders, and they have this like gas mask on their face, and they're just like super muscular, like. And it's a lot of fun building these things up, because we took a little bit of what they're already known for and their aesthetic, and then we just were able to, because that affordance space is so broad, we're able just to have fun playing with it. And it's funny because particularly with casual fans, you'd have casual fans like at the booth at like PAX East, and they'd be like, can you believe they licensed Johnny Stretch? And it's like, Johnny Stretch is a character we made up, right? But it's like but there's like enough there though that people are like doing it, and they don't kind of like really know. They're like, they got Andre the Giant, Macho Man, Johnny Stretch, Road Warrior. It just cracks me up, man. It's like, Jake the Snake's here. So was John the Snake, Brandy the Snake, and you're like, what? You know, it's. I wish I was making this up, dude.
Oh
You know?
my gosh, that's hilarious. That's awesome. But you did incorporate like at PAX East, you had the Fanny Pack Kid, and he's in the game, right?
Oh,
The
yeah.
Fanny Pack, yeah.
Dude,
so like you had
he's retro, right? Like it's
yeah,
like how would we not do it?
Yeah, exactly. But that was interesting. How different? This is going to be a question that I didn't have on my list, but just spawned in my head right now. How different was it when you got feedback from somebody like, or when you talked to somebody like Fan Pack Kid versus some of the older wrestlers in regards to, first of all, like what their story was like, and like their road to becoming a wrestler, and then also just how they gave feedback in regards to like, this is how you should incorporate this, or here's some feedback around the game.
You know, we knew from the very beginning of WrestleQuest that we wanted to use different eras and types of characters differently. So we knew that the way we wanted to use like Macho Man had to be like on a pedestal, like in a unique way that's never been done. Like the way we use the legends is you don't play as them, and we've been saying it constantly to set fans' expectations. That the way it works is like there's their value to wrestling as a sport and as a form of entertainment is so profound that there's like cities built in their image, right? So like when you go to that post-apocalyptic junkyard area, like there's larger than life Statue of Liberty statues of the Road Warriors frozen in time, and there's wrestlers there that are coming to pay homage that are like they're like, I don't know what to do with my gimmick. Do I go goth? Do I go surfer? Like, please help me, Road Warriors. Like, what should I do? You know, and it's like it's a world where wrestling is life. It's like people get up and they take their vitamins and they pump the iron, and it's like it's pretty interesting. So like that's how we wanted the legends to be used, and we knew we wanted to make sure that the story that every wrestler we met can relate to, which was the coming up the ranks, earning your stripes story. So we knew we wanted to be very selective, but to find some people that are still coming up that we think are going to make it, that we think are going to, be a great moment, and maybe we can help elevate them in our own limited way. So we met Fanny Pack Kid Cal, and just immediately loved him. Like his dad's amazing. His dad has been helping wrestlers of all levels for 20 some years. He was an independent wrestler himself too. Al Snow actually is like the personal wrestling trainer for Cal, Fanny Pack Kid. And Al's a wrestling academy, and he, Al's amazing, but it's like Cal really has a fighting chance to make something impressive, and he lives it, and he's great. He's super entertaining. So once we found this like 80s style Fanny Pack Kid that comes with this pedigree and is being mentored by these legends, we're like, this guy's great. We got to put him in the game. And he has a unique perspective too, since he like loves video games. A lot of the wrestlers, like you'd be on the phone for an hour trying to show them how to use their email and stuff, right? So it's like it's different talking to the guys who are like active wrestling in the 70s that are definitely later in their world right now, versus Cal, who's like streaming on TikTok at PAX East in the booth, right? Like it's like definitely a different slash, but it's been awesome because they like have unique ways to contribute. But something that's been a theme for WrestleQuest is that everyone is a fan of wrestling first. So it doesn't matter if you're Fanny Pack Kid or Jeff Jarrett or one of these wild streamers, influencers, fans. Like all of us have this shared love and interest in wrestling, and that's enough of a unifying language that it doesn't matter what your social media preference might be or what genres you play. Like it's been this really fun magnet and underdog story to get told no a million times and then win like 20 best in show, best gameplay awards, and it's like, man, the team can't be any more proud. We hope someone buys it, but it's like it's so rewarding when you make games and people love them. And in this case, because we were told no so many times, we had such low expectations for it. It's been such a wonderful surprise to have so many people just rally up about it. Like we'd literally get 100+ messages a day from strangers just asking for dates or physical copies, and it's really something we're not used to with our games, you know.
Yeah. And in a way, it's kind of like parallel to wrestlers coming up, right? In moving up and getting their name, and
no doubt.
Exactly, right? It's the same kind of story. Like, that's fascinating.
It's funny you said that, Roger, because we would introduce the concept of indie to these, 50, 60, 7-year-old, sometimes wrestlers. And when we would say indie, they would immediately assume it was wrestling.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh no, like, let me describe like the 4 sizes of game company. But there's different sizes, and and they would just pick out the buzzwords they could relate to. They'd be like, Nintendo, I know Nintendo. Like, I play Duck Hunt, yes, I'm like, not to add confusion, but we do make cartridge-based games, but it was definitely interesting because once we realized there was this shared fandom, we just changed how we introduce ourselves. It made it way easier for everyone to relate. Because once you would reframe it to them as, well, do you remember when you were on your come up? Do you remember when you were traveling around doing this, this, and this? And there was an era there when you were on your come up where a ton of people were supporting you, and you had the same skill and capability level as a ton of professionals that were out there, but you just didn't have that right stage yet. And they'd be like, yeah. I'm like, well, that's how I see our company right now. And immediately they'd be like, all right, send the agreement. We're doing this right now. It was true. It was just, over and over, because it was like they like rallied behind that. And then, I can't even tell you how many times I'd get like a late night phone call from a wrestler. I'd be like, hey, I'm out at a bar with XYZ wrestler, and I was just telling them how we're doing this, dude. Blah, 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 blah. It's like, I won't even get into the details, but I'm sitting here Christmas Eve on my family's in the other room, and I'm like trying to hide away on top of the wrestlers. I'm like, EDP, I gotta go. And he's like, listen, man, if you eat gluten today, I'm done. It was crazy.
That's awesome.
I'm sorry, bro, but like, I'm gonna eat some gluten today. But yeah, it's been an event, man. It was really hard to get in, and once you earn their trust and do well by them, and they have like an understanding for where you're coming from, it's like being part of like a tribe,
Yeah, that's awesome. One of the things that's unique for, well, not unique, but one of the things that's like staple, I guess, for JRPGs is loot and gear. Can you talk about how loot and gear is used in WrestleQuest?
Oh yeah. So given that it is a Toy Story meets wrestling universe, we have both the traditional character and add-ons and items, and we also have like the action figure modification crafting, because everything can be made in this kind of high fantasy affordance space. So one of the things that I think is most interesting about WrestleQuest is that it doesn't have character creators, because it's a story-driven RPG. So the way you're customizing your character are things like a custom walk-on with walk-on effects and music and modifiers, and things like choosing your party and your manager, and choosing your heel and face behaviors, and so all of those things actually tie back to different types of equipment items. Another thing that's been fun is the way we use the legends, because you don't play as the legends. Sometimes you can play with the legends. So in some cases, like you can, we've already spoiled this in a trailer, but in some cases, if you finish certain quest and you earn the achievement and opportunity to have Andre the Giant as a summons, which is a common RPG, ability and trope, like he can basically be summoned into the ring, lift the ring up because he's a human kaiju, snap it in half, and then vanish off screen. And it's like the coolest way to summon Andre the Giant,
Yeah,
and,
right.
And it's either that or you can wear a singlet. Either one, either one's there. That's one of the ways we use like the different customization and different items.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And also grinding for levels is also very common with JRPGs. How does the leveling system work in WrestleQuest, and how did you handle the grind element in WrestleQuest?
It's funny. I'm a member of quite a few JRPG groups. I don't want to use the incorrect language here, but there's one that I'm in called JRPG shitposting. Okay. and it's the same complaints all the time. Like I wish I didn't have to grind. I wish there's more quality of life features and it was easier to find my way around. And I wish there was more content and more playable characters. And given that we are fans of that genre, like I would say that WrestleQuest is more of a JRPG than a wrestling game, and it's oozing with wrestling because first and foremost, it's a JRPG built with all the dressings and features and sub features that you'd want to see in a game like that. There's just like a there's just a crazy amount to unpack, and nobody that is over 25 wants to grind in a JRPG. It's not fun, So we make it more lean forward than sit back with the way the gameplay works. So as an example, there are some mechanics that are intended to emulate the feeling of performing for a crowd, where the crowd's always on screen during battle, and there's a hype meter at the bottom where the character player is actually rewarded for using a variety and variants of moves rather than sitting there and spamming, burrito slam, burrito slam, burrito slam, right? And that's a pretty interesting way to solve it because we're actually on the hype meter, you actually are rewarded with items, perks, and better battles by doing some of the things that are fun about wrestling. Like it might be the first JRPG where people taunt all the time because it's funny and it's part of wrestling, right? Like part of that wrestling piece is like kicking them back and being like, no, 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 and it's like we need to make sure that was represented and that was really in the game. So and the hype meter has some levels of risk reward. Like if you go to pin somebody very early and they're not ready to be pinned and they kick out, they recover hit points. But if you do pin them early and you get an upset like that, like the crowd may not be super excited, but you get crazy perks for it. And it's like there's a lot of layers, with WrestleQuest like that, or the pin itself. Like the pin, all it is a very basic rhythm mechanic, and you can turn it off as an option from the menu for accessibility's sake. But the pin mechanic is another example of a lean forward. Like the pin mechanic has a difficulty to it where if you miss too many times in a row, it does become easier. Like the marker and the UI becomes slower and bigger and easier to line up. But it's like you were rewarded if you're able to hit that high skill rhythm moment, time it correctly. And these are small things, but they keep you engaged and playing and thinking, and it never makes you feel like you're exhausted in a battle. For that matter too, you don't have to fight every single person on a path. Like you can walk around them. Like you don't have to do it just to do its sake. And the only game that's allowed to do that to me is Gen 1 Pokemon. Otherwise, I just don't want to do it. Like who wants to fight every single beekeeper, every single corner? Like, no way, dude. I'm not 11 anymore, Like I don't want to fight that beekeeper. All I want to do is move on. Let me die. Don't make me grind. I want to have control over my RPG destiny.
Yeah. I did go out and find everyone because I loved the little bit that I got to play. Right, I did love because it's fun. That's the part that I do love about it too. It's like the wrestling is fun in this game, and there's something about how you guys are able to capture the excitement of wrestling in your matches too, but make it over the top. I mean, wrestling's over the top. Let's face it. But I mean, like,
for sure,
make it RPG. The JRPG elements too. Like, I don't know. I loved that about the game, and it's so vibrant and so colorful, and the fact that you stuck with, this retro feel, but it doesn't feel like, it's the artwork is so amazing. It doesn't feel retro, but it is retro, and you're like, wow, like it just everything pops in the game too. It's so good.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you how many hours of there's probably 40 people for 4 years full time. It's just been crazy, and it's like I'm saying that because when we first started it, we're like, oh, how do we make these buildings feel and look unique? How do we make the characters look unique? How do we get more expression? And that's what makes games and indie games, but any type, good, is like the nurturing and the attention, and it's like I can never get those days and hours back, but but the number of cats that have spent time just staring at a scene and being like, we need to add a water treatment with some biceps, or I can't go to sleep tonight, And the next thing you know, there's like, I go to the snow area and there's these like Jack snowmen, and I'm like, this is amazing. Like I never knew how much I wanted this. Why was there never a WCW Antarctica night? Why did that not happen? There's so much unexplored territory there.
Yeah.
Why are there no snowmen-based wrestling gimmicks? Like, what is it?
That is a good question, because like we've had plenty of games like Clay Fighter, right, where they had snowmen characters, but you're right, wrestlers, that's not a thing. That's funny.
Missed opportunity, man. But don't worry, we're bringing a lot of that in WrestleQuest.
Nice. So I alluded to this earlier. I love the fact that at PAX East you set up a wrestling ring and you had wrestling matches. You also let people walk into the ring and got their picture taken with the belt. And I will say, I know Skybound had other games there, and I'm not trying to say anything like that they didn't attract a lot of people, but I think your wrestling attracted a lot of people to that area. Whose idea was that to bring in wrestling into PAX East?
We without divulging like the part that I think would bother some of my friends, when we first started WrestleQuest, we put together like our vision document of what we want out of the game. And I remember the Skybound team kind of laughing and embracing some of it. And then, basically saying, well, there's no way we're doing these things. Like, we're not going to bring a wrestling ring to PAX. Like, we're not going to hire wrestlers. Like, I don't even know how to ensure that. Like, I refuse to go down this path. Like, you guys are over your skis, yada, yada, yada. And I said, well, how about if we get above a certain wish list threshold, how about you reward us with the wrestling ring? And they're like, okay, if you get over, it was like some preposterous number of wish lists. If you get over 250,000 wish lists in this time, then okay, then we'll do it. I was like, all right, cool. And I told every single friend, coworker, podcast interview, media person, I'm like, hey, can you put a link in that says wish listed on Steam? That was like, and I emailed them after. I'm like, don't tell anybody, but if we can hit this number, we're promised a wrestling ring. And I would BCC like their head of marketing on the emails, and he would text my phone and he'd be like, stop, whatever you're doing, it's not good. Like, you can't trust these people. They're going to talk about it. They're going to paint us in a bad light. I'm like, no, man, like they're all wrestling fans. Like they're going to rise up, He's like, you're a liability. You have to stop, And then, and I remember like looking at our wish list. It was like 6 months for PAX. I was like, we're gonna make it, And I remember messaging the Reed Pop people. I was like, what would it take for insurance because Boston's like Union City,
Yeah.
I'm like, what would it take on the insurance and union side for us to get a wrestling ring? And they were like, and I remember going through all the layers and all the steps and finding like the right people, safety, promoter, insurance packages, and finally we hit the wish list threshold, and I put together my my P&L, my budget, all my talent roster, and so we had hand selected the talent there too. We had like 3 of the talent that were there were actually like top 10 unsigned independent wrestlers in the U.S. Like JT Dunn's amazing, and I remember like some of the team there calling me and being like, all right, we're doing this thing, and if they get hurt, it's your fault. And if the PR problem, it's your fault. And we're going to brand it all WrestleQuest. It's not going to be branded Skybound, and it's your liability. And, and I was like, cool, let's do it. And I remember like we all got it set up. I remember the day before PAX opened, I was like sitting there with the team. It was like Flynn and Zach, and we're like kind of looking around. I was talking to Pat the Cat, and I was like, all right, like you guys, can you guys believe we got the wrestling ring? And they were like, no, like what are we gonna do with this? I was like, we're gonna wrestle, and it went off without a hitch. There was no one got hurt. Fans went crazy. We definitely shut down PAX a few times. Like it was like I had some great photos where we're taken from the skywalk where there were 10 people deep. You could not walk down the aisle. And it was just wrestling fans and gaming fans perplexed, and then just like captured by all the fun. And it's like a return from COVID too, right? It's like the events have been a little dry, and on the last event after it was over, the last match, we did 3 cards. After the last one was over, I remember one of the Skybound team members came over and was like, I can't believe that you guys pulled this off and nobody got hurt and everything's safe. He's like, I just hope we don't get some hate mail later. And it was like just crazy positive. Like I can't even tell you how many we had people that we hadn't even spoken to in like 4 years that were just texting and calling and emailing us and being like, "Are you guys wrestling people at PAX?" I'm like, "Kind of," like. Yeah, it was awesome, man. But that's actually like the majority of the story of how the ring happened. Was that was on our wish list, and we just made a deal that if we got far enough that we'd work it out, and we did, and we it was great. Fans like really did love that, by the way, and I hope we can do it again at an event. But I guess it depends how the game sells. So
yeah. I think I'll do well. I had so much fun. That was my highlight of PAX East was so I went to see your discussion on WrestleQuest. JRPGs and wrestling, right? Like the combination too. And you mentioned like we had a wrestling match on Friday night, and I was like, wait, what? And then I found out, at noon on Saturday you're gonna have more. And I was like, 10:30, standing in front. I'm like, I have a lunch break that I could sit here and stand right in front. And I stood right in front, and it was so awesome. It was so much fun. It was just a blast, and the wrestlers were fantastic. It was so good.
Yeah, I'm good. You liked it, man. I'm so glad you were able to check it out. I really hope we can do something else special later this year after the game launches. We have 2 events we've been flirting with for a while about this, and it's like a wrestling fan's dream, right? Like tell these stories, work with these legends, and then like set up your own wrestling cards. Like, why would I not want to live this? This might be my last 6 months of my life, dude.
Yeah. Oh man, and just the heels were so much fun too. Like in you guys did, it was so much fun. Like they really played the crowd, and and like I said before recording, it was like my kid dream come true where I get to sit in the front of as an adult too, right? Like of course I want to go to wrestling matches and sit in front, but like I was right in front and I got to interact with the wrestlers. It was a blast. It was so much fun.
Yeah, I'm so glad, man. It's like it's probably my number one and top 3 memories of being with the team and having them. Like it was just so great watching them so happy, fans so happy. Several of the publishers that said like vehemently no to us were there. They were just like, there was a time where I was like sending them custom wrestling belts to their office to sign the game, and I just know they were just like, oh god, these guys again. And then it was great being at PAX East with our new wrestling belts in our ring, shutting down PAX and having some of those publishers be like, hey James.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we're onto something, man. Like someone else launched. You probably saw the announcement for Wrestle Story. Someone else's wrestling JRPG. I think that's like a flattering. AEW just announced a Figure Fighters, which is like a wrestling action figure toy based game, and I was like, dude, WrestleQuest is making all sorts of things happen out there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. When does this game come out then? When
August
does WrestleQuest come out?
We're ticking down, dude. Yeah.
Wow. And where can all people play this game? I know, like I think Switch, right? And Xbox.
So PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox X, Nintendo Switch, of course on Steam. Please go wish list it now. We can do another ring. And it's coming all over the place. There's a couple other unannounced distribution channels that we're going to be telling the world about shortly, but it's going to be easy to find WrestleQuest.
Nice. One last question I have for you, and then I'll let you go. What's one thing that you learned about yourself in the process of making this game?
It's a good question. I guess I learned that I will continue forward well beyond any reason to my detriment, and I need to be surrounded by people who are willing to tell me no. That's been a real theme for sure.
Nice. Well, James, it was a real pleasure meeting you. I mean, I met you at PAX, but it's a real pleasure getting to sit and talk to you about WrestleQuest. I cannot wait for this game to come out. And August 8th can't come soon. Oh, 8th or 6th, I'm sorry. Did you say 6th or 8th?
Yeah, August 8th.
August 8th, okay. I cannot wait for that date to come. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule and meeting with me.
Yeah, do me too. I can't wait. It's going to be so much fun. We're going to go so hard for WrestleQuest.
Oh, that's great. All right. Thanks, James.
Good night, buddy.
Yeah, you too.